What is up, YouTube? My name is Alex. Welcome back to the Lifting Nomad. I'm at the tail end of my 4-month trip through Latin America. Done some really cool things throughout the last few months, and I'm starting to reflect on my trip and sort of my thoughts on being a solo traveler and seeing these places and doing these things by myself and what it really means to be a solo traveler. So in this video, I just want to talk about my experiences, my feelings, my thoughts, how it's been over the last few months, and maybe decide if this is for you or maybe it's not for you. So without further ado, let's get into the video. Right. So I think for starters, we should talk about where I've been and what I've done. So my adventure actually started back in mid-December when I packed up all of my shit and basically moved everything into a suitcase and a backpack to start my trip. I actually went on a Virgin Voyages cruise with my dad over Christmas, and then from there I flew directly from Miami to Buenos Aires, Argentina. So obviously the cruise over Christmas with my dad, not exactly solo travel, but then I went from Miami to Buenos Aires, Argentina. So very, very long flight from Miami to Bogota, layover in Bogota to Buenos Aires. And from there, I was in Buenos Aires for about 2 months. And while I was there, I did some pretty cool stuff, but let's just start from the top. Let's start from the top. Buenos Aires. An amazing time. I had such a blast there. I was staying in the Palermo Soho neighborhood, which is like the general sort of recommended neighborhood that if you're solo traveling, if you're Googling it, that's generally where they want. They'll recommend you to stay. There's lots of hostels there, lots of hotels, lots of apartments, Airbnbs, things to rent, and a ton of things to do. And at this point, I was actually getting a little bit uncertain, even though I was just at the beginning of the trip. I landed from that cruise, I had COVID, and I had chipped my tooth on that. So I was in a foreign country for the first time, in Argentina, where at the time my Spanish was like, okay. I'd been taking classes for about 6 months at that point, but it wasn't like in practice of living in an immersed country. That was my first time like being in Argentina and being in a country that only speak Spanish. So I landed, I had a chipped tooth, I had COVID, and I had to navigate, first of all, going to finding a dentist that speaks English was fun enough. Then also making sure that they know what I was saying and not gonna wake up with like grills or fangs or something. But I ended up kind of sorting it out and getting that tooth fixed. And I basically took like a week of just like working. I basically just took like a week of staying in bed and watching movies and sleeping. It was super, super tiring. I really didn't feel like that terrible. I didn't have like the bad cough or anything, but it was just super, super tiring. So down there, it was so hot as well. So even just like going out to get some fresh air and get a walk, it was like 35 degrees Celsius, so like 90s Fahrenheit. It was very, very, very hot. So even though I was trying to like, keep my mental health and stay focused on what we were doing, it was still very hard to do that. So with that being said, being in Argentina was interesting, in Buenos Aires especially. What I ended up doing to try and feel a little bit more at home was I ended up going on like a few different Hinge dates, ended up making some friends with some of those girls, and not in like a romantic way, just became platonic friends, ended up hanging out for a lot of that trip. And we did some pretty cool things. So we did a lot of the language exchanges. So they do this thing called Mundolingo, which is an amazing way to meet people. And I think, looking back on it now, when I had a lot of that anxiety and a lot of the issues in my mental health, worrying about, okay, did I do the right thing? Am I way over my head? Actually, the Mundolingo was a really, really good thing for me. It let me kind of relax. It let me focus on just meeting people and speaking English and kind of feeling like home, right? Mundolingo does this really cool thing where it's like a language exchange, which if you've ever been to any of these foreign countries, a lot of places do language exchanges. And what they do is actually let you get stickers for each of the languages you speak, but it gets a little bit more specific. So I'm from Canada, and I was able to get a Canadian flag sticker, and then like the Argentinian flag, and then the French flag, because we learn French in Canada. And it's really cool to go around this bar and you're just meeting and chatting with people, and you can see like, okay, you're from Canada as well. And even talking with someone from home can give you a sense of like belonging and make you feel a little bit more like welcomed and warm inside, honestly. Even though you're in a foreign country, you're a long way from home, it's kind of hard to get that connection. So when you meet someone from home, I definitely recommend like just chatting them up. Talking to people from home is a really good way to do that as well. I did like a FaceTime with my sister to try and feel like a little bit more at home. But ultimately, like, you kind of just got to stick with it. There's going to be an uncomfortable period at the beginning where you're not sure if you made the right decision. Was this a mistake? Do you feel unsafe? Do you want to go home? But for me, I knew that it was eventually going to go away. And then now, like, being, 4 months into this thing, it's just second nature. Like, I think I'm going to get culture shock when I get back to Toronto versus like the culture shock of a new country. I think I'm going to get reverse culture shock of going back to the place that I'm from. While I was also in Buenos Aires, we did some pretty cool things. I went to Uruguay, which in Montevideo, so the capital city of Uruguay, took a really bougie ferry across the harbor. It takes about 3 hours to get there from Buenos Aires with that girl that I met on a Hinge date. So Mundolingo is a great way to do it. Also, like, just going on dating apps. I think Hinge is a really good one as well, because there's some risk in some of these countries of using things like Tinder, where like locals unfortunately have like a reputation of sometimes like drugging guys and like robbing them and shit, particularly in Colombia where I am now. The thing about its Hinge is it can't be downloaded anywhere outside of North America. So if you're down there and you're on Hinge and you're matching with people, those are people who have traveled or are from outside of that country. So it's just a little bit better of a way to meet like English speakers, potentially even people like from your hometown, which, like I said, is really an easy way to feel like comforting. So that's something you can do. The language exchange is another good thing. Then we went to Uruguay, right? Uruguay was amazing. It was a really cool place. Very hot, very, very hot, and like a beach town, which was kind of cool. So being in Montevideo, we got to go to the beach, we got to go to some local restaurants, get some food. Very similar to Argentina. I've said this before, but I probably wouldn't recommend going to Uruguay if you're going to Buenos Aires, because they're essentially the same thing, but Montevideo was just like 5 times the price. Less accessible, it's less walkable, and like less safe, honestly. So if you're going to be going to Argentina, I would not recommend going to Uruguay. It's basically the same thing. You don't need to go see it. Then after Uruguay, I was back in Buenos Aires for a little while, and from there I actually did a little bit of touring around Argentina itself. So I went to Cordoba, I went to Bariloche in Patagonia, spent some time down there, and overall I just had kind of a bit of an domestic travel adventure. It was really cool. Patagonia for me was too cold, honestly. I'm a Canadian who hates the cold, so for me it was too cold down there, but I would highly recommend going check it out. It was beautiful, one of the nicest places, I think, like nature-wise, I've ever been in my life. Very, very cool. And I was staying in the Selena hostels, so when I was there in Bariloche, I ended up just like kind of listening to some live music in the lobby. Didn't really meet too many people. That one was not that social. And that's another reason I like to stay in hostels when I'm doing shorter trips, because it's really, really easy to meet people. So when I was in Cordoba, for instance, they do like, they had like a bar in the basement, tons and tons of people there. And then the Cordoba city is very like student friendly. So there's a lot of like bars that are catered to be a little bit cheaper, and a lot more like lively, I guess, instead of like bougie, kind of like how Buenos Aires has some place like that. So Cordoba, I met a fair bit of people at that Selena hostel. It was a great time. I really had a blast there. And then after Cordoba, I flew to Lima, Peru, which was a fun little mix-up. I was there for a few days. I was supposed to be in Lima a little bit longer, but part of the joy of solo travel is that your plans are gonna go awry. Shit is gonna hit the fan. So all the protests, when I booked Lima was back in like October, but because of all the protests, I ended up canceling that leg of my trip for February. I was supposed to be there the whole month. Because of the protests, I wasn't gonna be able to do Cusco, Machu Picchu, the Rainbow Mountains, any like the really big classic Peru activities. I wasn't gonna be able to do them. So instead I went there for a few days, tried some of the food, had some of the beers, did like a pub crawl out of I stayed at the Selena in Lima as well. Met some people there, had an amazing time, and overall just had a really good weekend. So that was like en route from BA to Mexico City. So after Lima, I was, like I said, dealing with the fact that my trip had got canceled. Then I went to Mexico City, and this is where I kind of changed clips a little bit. I did something called Remote Year, which I'll end up probably reviewing in a separate video, but I think it's a nice kind of break from doing just solo travel. So Remote Year is basically like Contiki, where it's like pre-arranged group travel. You sign up by yourself, they put you in like with a roommate, they give you like basically like a WeWork sort of membership for the month in some sort of co-working place that's nearby your accommodations. They do like local activities. So for instance, I'll show some of the videos here in Mexico City, but we did like the Piramides de Teotihuacan. We did a Xochimilco boat, which was like one of these little river boats. So you go up and down the river and drink and party. It was awesome. I had a blast in Mexico City. They also have like local community leaders who are from that city, who can show you around, who speak the local language, who know it really, really well. So it's kind of a nice little change from just like solo traveling, because honestly, it gets kind of exhausting. When you're just always trying to meet new people, you have to put yourself out there all the time. It's not as easy to do it long term, especially like even someone like me who's extremely extroverted. I can only do it so long. I can only imagine what it's like if you're introverted and you like your social battery is not that not that good. I think it must be really, really difficult. So I think like trips like Remote Year, where you get a group of like 25 to 30 people, and they're all like adults, all, you know, having proper jobs. They're usually like 25 to 35 on age, and they're showing you these local experiences. You're feeling like you're living there. It's a really, really cool time. Like right now, after Mexico City, had a blast on Remote Year. I'm actually on Remote Year again in Medellin right now, Medellin, Colombia, and we're doing like a lot of the local events here as well. This weekend, going to Santa Marta on the Colombian coast, near like on the Caribbean Sea. But again, it's just kind of like a nice little breakup, because it's like we have like essentially like a WhatsApp group of all the people on it, and it's just really nice if you're ever like, you know, kind of feeling lonely, kind of feeling anxious. You can just post up there and you want to grab a drink and you want to go for dinner, and you have like a crew of people that you're already friends with who are usually up for most things because they're here for, you know, like a month at a time. So it's a really nice way, I think, to break it up. I'd like to do Remote Year probably 1 to 3 months of the year, and then solo travel the rest. I think it's a nice way to have a change of pace as well. Like, you know, it's kind of nice to not be always the one organizing and planning the events. So I have a tendency to just like dominate conversations and just like create my own itinerary. So it's kind of refreshing to have someone else just take the reins and me just show up and, you know, say, fuck it, I just do whatever you want me to do. It's a nice little break for me, and honestly, like kind of a holiday from being like the extroverted kind of leader. So after Medellin, that's it. That's the end of my trip. I'm headed back home for now. It's been an amazing few months down here in Latin America. Learned a lot about myself, met some amazing people, seen some incredible things over the last few months. But really, like solo travel, it is tough. So I think like doing things like group travel every now and then, or bringing friends with you, is a nice way to assure that you have some communication. You know, in being that, like, we all get a little bit of anxiety. So having someone to lean on, having someone to just even like sit around and watch a movie with, or just like sit around and get some food with, is really, really good for your mental health in the long run. And anyone who's traveled for an extended period of time, they'll tell you like the social aspect, while it's super, super important, can also be overwhelming. So sometimes you just need a little bit of balance. You need your me time, you need some group time. But overall, it's, you know, solo travel on social media is glamorized quite a lot of being this like amazing cure-all thing. But the reality is it's sometimes tough, and there's challenges that come with it, and things are gonna go wrong, and it's not all gonna work out the plan, and you're not gonna see everything you wanna see. You're not gonna be able to do everything you wanna do. So if you can accept that and go into it with an open mind of what you're looking to do, and just be, you know, curious to the fact that you're in a foreign place, you don't know the area, you don't likely speak the language that well, and just enjoy that discomfort, I think that's like gonna be the best growing phase that you can really ever have. So in hindsight, I think that I'm super, super grateful for this opportunity. And who knows, next spot, I don't know, Croatia, Egypt, Brazil, I don't know. The world's a big place, so I'm gonna go out and find it. But that's pretty much gonna be the video. Hope this was useful to hear my opinion on solo travel, and kind of what it's been like to do it over the last few months. So if this was useful, feel free to leave a like in the comment in the section below. Always helps the algorithm. If you're not subscribed, feel free to do so as well. Always appreciate it. But that's gonna be the video. Thank you very much for watching. My name's Alex. We'll see you in the next one. Peace.